Josip Tito, a man viewed by some as a great leader who ushered in a time of prosperity, while others view him as a ruthless dictator, no different from the rest that filled Eastern Europe during the Cold War. This shouldn't be a surprise, as keeping the Balkans united under a single flag was no easy task, as the Austro-Hungarians had learned the hard way leading up to World War One. It begs the question, how did Tito manage to maintain control over Yugoslavia for nearly 5 decades? Tito's partisans began to form and gain support during the Second World War, when the Balkans were controlled by the Italians and the Germans. However, with the might of the established occupied nations and the puppet states, a victory for the partisans seemed very unlikely, as they seemed to lack the strength necessary to reclaim control over the region. So how did they do it? Turns out all you need is luck, a nice mountain range to retreat to, and a nice trusty ally to get you out of trouble. Now that Tito's newly established Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia was in power, he had to decide what he would make of this new opportunity. An election for leadership proved to be the best course of action, so it was decided upon that a questionably authentic election would take place. To no surprise, Tito's officials were all voted in, with any anti-communists and supporters of the previous authority being swiftly removed. Because of the communist government, Yugoslavia became another state to add to the Soviet Union's growing collection of communist satellite states it had control over. Tito and his government fit the Soviet mold very well, so well in fact that it actually started to annoy Stalin. This annoyance was further increased by Tito's rather independent nature, where he went against Stalin's advice and pursued risky aims involving himself in Albania and Greece. Stalin saw it as necessary to remove Tito from power, but simply was unable to purge Yugoslavian leadership of him. In the end, Stalin ended up kicking the troublemaker state out of its alliance, leading to Yugoslavian independence from the USSR. To Tito, this was a massive relief, as he could go ahead with whatever he desired without the Soviets breathing down his neck. Or so he thought. After the removal, Tito was faced with assassination attempts, condemnation from other communist countries, and economic boycotts, all organized by the USSR. Through yet another strike of luck, Tito managed to escape Stalin's wrath alive. However, not everyone could escape from this conflict in one piece, as Tito sent Stalin's supporters in Yugoslavia to various containment camps, such as Goli Otok in modern-day Croatia, if they were even remotely suspicious of siding with Stalin and the USSR. One of the new policies Tito set in place in the coming years was the policy of non-alignment, which meant that Yugoslavia would neither side with the capitalists to the west or the communists to the east. Once Stalin was no longer in the picture, Tito worked hard to create good relations between both sides, along with partnerships with neutral nations such as Egypt and India. The mixture of both cordial relations with the East and West somehow worked, with Tito never having to join a side or have the whole thing fall apart in front of him. Yugoslavia under Tito's rule was a large mixture of various ethnicities and nationalities, which posed some issues in his control over the people. On one hand, Tito would often preach about how the various nationalities within Yugoslavia should unite as one strong nation. And he also promoted the independence and decentralization of the nationalities within Yugoslavia. Somehow, this hypocritical stance actually worked, pleasing and earning the support of both sides. Unfortunately for Tito, his rule came to an end after his death in 1980, 3 days before his 88th birthday. Tito's own indecisive policies created the conditions that would lead to the downfall of his lifelong creation. Ethnic tensions and divisions in political ideology immediately began to resurface, resulting in Yugoslavia dissolving into smaller independent states a decade later. But hey, at least he will go down as the greatest man in Yugoslavian history.